This is Brian Jukes. I'll be leading you through the use of the apostrophe today. When do we use apostrophes? Well, typically in three different ways. We use apostrophes all the time when we form contractions, such as I won't be home in time, or I can't come to the party. The words won't and can't are contractions for will not and cannot. I think most of us are pretty familiar with using apostrophes this way and are pretty comfortable. I don't see too many mistakes with this particular use of apostrophes. The next use of apostrophes that presents all kinds of problems is that in expressions of possession, such as Mr. Jukes' classes are interesting, the dog's water dish is empty, that is the secretary's break room, that is the secretary's desk. We're going to explore rules regarding possessive nouns, nouns that are singular and plural, nouns that end in S, and nouns that do not end in S. Once you know these rules, you should be pretty adept at using the apostrophe in expressions of possession. Another use of apostrophes, which is falling out of use actually, is with plural numbers and letters. We put the apostrophe S with A's because it's a plural letter, apostrophe S with 80s because it's a plural number. The problem, of course, is that people get crazy with apostrophes and they start using them with all plural nouns, such as this sign I saw as I was driving through Nevada. I just found this tragically humorous. Plural nouns do not take an apostrophe. Somebody thought that at a gas station, the restrooms should take an apostrophe S. Of course, it should just be with an S. Restrooms plural does not require an apostrophe. And often I see things like this. This I saw at my doctor's office once as I went in for a doctor's appointment. We no longer accept cash. We do accept payments, apostrophe S, I don't know why, in the form of check, credit, or, debit, credit, or check. Copays, again, with the apostrophe S for no reason whatsoever, are to be paid, misspelled, at the time of service. So payments is just plural. You don't need an apostrophe S, you just put an S. If you're making a noun plural, you simply add an S. If you're copays, you're just adding an S. This is particularly problematic in texting, I found. Whenever I try to make any noun plural when I text, the autocorrect in texting wants to make it an apostrophe S. For that reason alone, I turned off autocorrect in my texting because it drives me nuts that every time I make any kind of a plural noun, especially plural names such as the Jukeses or the Joneses or the Smiths, anytime you enter a plural name into a text, autocorrect wants to add an apostrophe S for some reason. Whenever you make any noun plural, you just add the S or the ES if it's to a noun that ends in S. So the restroom, and to make it plural, we simply add an S. The restrooms, the bus, because it's a noun that ends in S, we're going to add an ES to the buses, right? Notice no apostrophes. Mr. Smith, if we're talking about the entire family, it would be the Smiths. We just add an S. Mr. Jukes, again a noun which ends in S. We're going to add an ES to make it plural. When we talk about the entire family, it's the Jukeses, right? So the buses, the Jukeses, the restrooms, the Smiths. We add an S to nouns that do not end in S. We add an ES to nouns that end in S. This is how we make all nouns plural. So if we want to make them possessive, and we'll get into the rules here in just a little bit, but we simply add an apostrophe S to restroom, and then if we're talking about more than one, we just add the apostrophe to the S. So notice, again, and I'll mention this later on, you want to first decide whether you're talking about more than one. Are we talking about one restroom? Then it will be apostrophe S. If we're talking about more than one restroom, we're going to first make it plural and then add the apostrophe, in this case after the S. The bus's tires, apostrophe S, when we're talking about one bus. The bus's tires, again, sounds exactly the same, but spelled quite differently when we're talking about more than one bus. So in the first example here, the bus's tires are flat. We have an apostrophe S added to the word bus because it's a single bus with flat tires. The second example, buses, adding an ES and then the apostrophe after the S, we have several buses all with flat tires. So again, first decide whether you want to make it plural, and then decide how you want to add the possession. Mr. Smith's office, apostrophe S. The Smith's home, we add the apostrophe after the S. Mr. Jukes' lessons, and then of course the Jukes' conversation. We add the ES, making it plural, and then we add the apostrophe afterwards to make it possessive. So if we want to make something plural, we simply add an S or an ES, and then if we want to make it possessive, then we need to know the rules. Okay, so I promised this. This is what you need to know. These are the rules you need to know when making a noun possessive. So again, first determine if the word is singular or plural. Then you add an apostrophe S if it does not end in S. If it's plural and ending in S, which again, most plural nouns do end in S, then you just add the apostrophe. If it's singular and ending in S, then you need to sound it out. And we're going to get to that. You can see here with my little table, single nouns that do not end in S, you add an apostrophe S. Single nouns that do end in S, and there are a few of those, such as my name, Jukes, Mr. Jukes, then you need to sound it out. And then plural nouns. Obviously, if it doesn't end in S, just like a singular noun that does not end in S, you add an apostrophe S. And when it's plural and it ends in S, you just put the apostrophe after the S. So let's get to some specific examples here. Single nouns that do not end in S, such as boy, man, woman, dog, car, Mr. Smith, secretary, baby. Then you just add the apostrophe S to all of those single nouns and you make them possessive, such as the boy's car, the man's tools, such. You get the idea. Now, plural nouns typically do end in S, but there are a few that do not, such as men, women, children, people, faculty, staff, mice. These are all plural nouns, but they do not end in S. So just like singular nouns that do not end in S, you add just the apostrophe S. Now, most plural nouns do end in S, and so you simply put the apostrophe after the S. Again, remembering to make the noun plural first. So the Jukeses, not the Jukes, right? It'd be Mr. Jukes, the Jukeses, Mr. Smith, the Smiths. So you make the noun plural, and then after making it plural, you add the apostrophe after the S. Now, single nouns that end in S get a little funky. There is a choice here. I believe Mr. Jukes' office sounds better than Mr. Jukes' office, but some people might disagree. Mr. Ross' office, I'd probably say Mr. Ross's office. But I'd say with those first two, really it's about sound. And if you think both of them sound okay with an apostrophe S, then I'd say go for it. There are some nouns that are clearly not, they don't sound right if you add an apostrophe S, such as Socrates. And I think if I sound it out for you, you'll hear it. So Socrates' arguments would be the appropriate way of phrasing that possessive noun. Listen to it if I add an apostrophe S. It would be Socrates' arguments. And you can hear the Z sound, can't you? Socrates' just doesn't sound right. Socrates' arguments, you hear that ZZ sound. So we would just say Socrates' arguments. We want to avoid that Z sound. Other nouns, such as boss, clearly do need to take an apostrophe S. We would never say, that's my boss' office. You would say, that's my boss's office, right? You'd never say, those are the bus tires. You would say, those are the bus's tires, or whatever you want to say belonging to the bus. Probably say Jesus' teachings. Again, that Z sound comes in. If we add an apostrophe S, it would be Jesus's. And you can hear that Jesus's teachings doesn't sound right. Again, what we want to do is avoid that Z sound. So it's all about sound with single nouns that end in S. And I've given you other examples with news and diabetes. These nouns are just some samples of single nouns that end in S, and you can see that sometimes you add an apostrophe, sometimes an apostrophe S, and honestly, the only way to know which is which with single nouns that end in S is to sound it out. With the apostrophe, there is typically less likelihood of a Z sound, and that's what you want to avoid, such as Socrates's. You want to just say Socrates writings, right? So if you think that there's a kind of a Z sound that's being formed, if it sounds just a little funky, obviously you want to go with just the apostrophe after the S in single nouns that end in S. We also have to be careful in showing possession with compound subjects. Now, the use of apostrophes differs with possessive compound subjects depending on whether there is joint ownership. As we can see from this table here, when a couple, or we could have 3 or 4 names here if we wanted, but whenever we have joint ownership with 2 or more people, we use the apostrophe or the apostrophe S only after the last name. So it's Brad and Janet's wedding, right? Because they jointly own that wedding. It belongs to both of them. Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote musicals together. Those jointly belong to them as a musical duo. Sally and Owen's joint income, right? Because this is something that they jointly own, that they both own. So we use the apostrophe or the apostrophe S, depending on what name is at the end here, at the last name or on the last name. Now, individually, if they own something, we have a list of names, then we use the apostrophe or the apostrophe S after each name. So it's Brad's and Janet's essays because they individually wrote essays. They belong to them individually. Oliver Stone's and Alfred Hitchcock's movies because these are 2 different directors who do not collaborate, never collaborated on a single movie. Sally's and Owen's offices, 2 different offices owned by 2 different people. So again, individually, we use the apostrophe or the apostrophe S after each name, jointly only after the last name listed. Okay, well, one last comment before we wrap this lesson up, and that is possessive pronouns versus contractions. People tend to think that because it's a possessive, we have to add an apostrophe S, but we don't add apostrophes or apostrophe S's to any possessive pronouns. We say his book, no apostrophe, her room, no apostrophe, its wing. Now, ITS is a possessive pronoun, right? And because it's a pronoun and not a noun, we're not going to add anything. It's just going to be its wing, ITS, its wing is broken. Whose book is lost? I know whose car that is, right? These are all possessive pronouns. Contractions, as we've already mentioned, those are pretty easy. He is studying can be written as he's studying. She is working can be written as she's working. It is going well. So again, IT apostrophe S means it is. It is going well. It's going well. Who is going to the party? Who's going to the party? I know who is sitting in that chair. I know who's sitting in that chair. So the who's, WHO apostrophe S, represents who is, whereas the whose, WHOSE, represents the possessive of, so whose book, whose car, and so forth. Okay, I hope I've made this as clear as mud. Hopefully this will help you as you move forward in the class.